Bonjour à toutes et tous, vous écoutez First Print, votre podcast comics préféré pour une nouvelle émission du format Super Friends. En ce début d'année, on a déjà un roster complètement incroyable sur le podcast, vous en avez l'habitude, mais c'est toujours rendre l'exceptionnel banal avec First Print, et on est ravis d'accueillir une nouvelle fois dans le podcast Zoe Thorogood qui nous a fait le plaisir de venir à Angoulême pour la sortie en France de It's Lonely at the Center of the Earth. On vous en a déjà dit beaucoup de bien, moi-même ça fait plus d'1 an et demi que je force sur cet album depuis qu'il est sorti en VO, et on avait déjà pu en parler avec Zoé il y a juste avant la sortie. Donc là on va pouvoir revenir dessus, mais également aborder la suite de sa carrière, puisque elle est loin d'en avoir fini avec les comics. Donc cette interview sera intégralement enregistrée en anglais. Après le générique, donc vous retrouverez l'accent anglais de Zoé. Merci de nous écouter, j'espère que ça vous plaira. So it's really, really nice to have you back here, Zoe, in our podcast. Thank you for coming back to France.
Thank you for having me back.
So last time we spoke, it was a discussion mainly about Billy Scott, but It's Lonely at the Center of the Earth was already out. But I feel that we didn't discuss enough about it. So maybe for the people that did not listen to the previous podcast we did together, and I think there are also many people because during the year and a half, we can say that your career exploded, really. So can you just give us a little bit back more of the origin story of It's Lonely?
So It's Lonely at the Center of the Earth is it's an autobiographic novel, but it's very experimental and absurdist. I started making it not knowing it was ever going to be a book. I didn't intend for it to be published. It was just pure kind of therapy. And so it's just this very chaotic kind of stream of consciousness that became a book. That's the only way I can explain it.
But you thought that you told me that you had a mental breakdown, and that was the start of doing the comics, the comics, and so you really drew the pages one by one without exactly knowing where you were getting to?
Yeah. So especially at the start, because I wasn't intending for it to be a book. It was really just kind of, I would get up each day and just draw and just, trying to express things about myself. Like the book also isn't in the order it was made. I didn't know what order the pages were going to be in until the day I submitted, until the day of deadline. And then I figured out where pages were going to go, because it was such this chaotic process. But yeah.
And so at what point did it become less chaotic? Because still when we read it right now, so we have the structure, which is basically Zoe Thorogood is struggling to do a graphic novel, right, but she's still trying to do it.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't know that was kind of the point of the book until about halfway through it, halfway through making it. And I think that I've always been interested in kind of meta stories and stories about artists. My first book was about an artist. I've always been interested in the world of creatives. And I was I think once I could kind of, halfway through creating, I think my depression lifted a bit. I think making the book helped me a lot. And once I was kind of lifted enough from my depression and I could see it more objectively, and I could see it more as a story about this artist who was losing her identity in this mesh of art and loneliness and stuff. And I think it became a lot less chaotic at that point, because I was looking at it more as an observer rather than being a book about me, if that makes sense.
But it's a book about you, but there are many forms of you in this book. You told us before that you were passionate about characters and character design. How hard is it to character design yourself?
I think it came pretty naturally. I do this thing. I used to draw self-portraits a lot because I found it very grounding. I found if I was struggling with anxiety or depression or anything, and I just didn't want to do anything, or I couldn't focus. When you feel like the world is kind of collapsing around you, I could just sit in front of a mirror, really ground myself by just taking a piece of paper and drawing what's in front of me. And so I think that it was I had already had kind of my own way of drawing myself from that. And the other versions of me just kind of came to me very quickly because I feel like they were all kind of different art styles that I've had at different points in my life. Like I tried to do one that was more manga inspired. That was how I used to draw when I was, when I was a teenager. And before that, the very chibi little one was maybe how I was drawing when I was around 13. And so I kind of already had these kind of, it was very organic and it was very fast. There was really not a lot of thought went into it at all. The whole book was very much, it just felt like such an organic experience that I really didn't have to, sit down and think, how am I going to convey this? How am I going to plot this? Because it was just, like I say, a stream of consciousness, which is why I think some of it is so chaotic and just, it just jumps around a lot because that was just how it was made.
But so I guess that you don't have also to put down into a script what you are saying to yourself as the different versions of you. It just comes naturally to I get the many you that live inside your head.
Yeah, well, I think I'm always contradicting myself when I'm thinking about things. I feel like I never am entirely sure what I'm not very absolutist in my thoughts, I think. And so it was really easy to kind of split those things into different characters. And, it was just kind of me having, a lot of the conversations with the different Zoes in the book are just, it's just me just sitting there thinking and like arguing with myself, like in my head.
And you're even arguing about the book itself. Some versions of you are saying but what you do is selfish. Nobody would care about a comic, a graphic novel about you. And even though even in the end, you're still saying that to yourself. So my question is you did not gain any confidence into this work as you were going through it?
I just found, I'm glad I made it and I'm proud of it. And I think it's a, a really interesting piece of art, honestly. But I also it's hard to explain. I feel embarrassed sometimes. There's a part of me that's kind of embarrassed that I've, not the content of the book, because I have no shame about, saying I have depression or any silly things I've done in my life. I really don't. But there is a level of embarrassment of spending so long making a book about myself and my issues and things. Like that part of it, I just sometimes there's a part of me that just hates that I've done that and hates spotlight, hates any kind of attention and just yeah. So there's yeah.
But you don't like to have the spotlights. But even in this book, so while you've been doing it, it wasn't out yet. But you already saying that some people in the comics industry were talking about you about the next big thing, the new story in comics. And I think that the publication of It's Lonely has aggravated that. So isn't it hard for someone that don't want to be in the spotlight because now you're quite in the spotlight? Yeah,
and I hate it. And I tell every opportunity, I'm just I don't agree with people saying that, and I hate it, and I think it's stupid. And I think that firstly, I don't think anybody should have that pressure on them, and secondly, I think it's just so naive to kind of, put that on one person. I think there's a lot of people in my generation doing really cool things with lots of different media, not just comics. It's just there's so much new innovation happening, and I think I'm just have recently just been the loudest maybe. But yeah, I feel after making It's Lonely, because what I've been doing recently is Hack Slash, Tim Seeley's Hack Slash, and I love it. I think it's great. But one of the reasons I did take that project, and I've told Tim this, one of the reasons I took it was because it was after I finished It's Lonely, and it was kind of, It's Lonely definitely has this artsy, pretentious bullshit kind of thing. It's I think it's very grounded at the same time, but it's also got it's a little, it's a little pretentious. And I think I wanted to be I'm not this future of comics title that some people have decided for me. I just, I was no, I'm just going to draw sexy girls fighting monsters and B-movie shit for a bit, because I don't want to get stuck doing anything. I don't want to have any kind of label. I want to prove that I can do whatever I want and just kind of, I don't need any kind of pressure.
But somehow you had already proven it, because you started by doing what you wanted, Billy Scott or even It's Lonely. It's a project that you wanted to do. So you don't have to prove this anymore. We already seen that you can do whatever you want.
Yeah, I guess. But as far as genres go, people say Hack Slash is kind of, somebody said that it's their favorite recent popcorn comic, and I love that, because it's okay, yeah, Zoe Thorogood doing this popcorn comic, people just didn't expect that to happen, and So I'm glad I...
So you want to go where people don't wait for you?
Yes, yeah. I don't want to get... Yeah, and I think especially with It's Lonely, and I would love at some point to revisit autobio. I would love to do that. And I would love It's Lonely to be... in my head, I have it as a trilogy, but it's figuring it out is complicated because I don't want any of the books to feel like the first one. But obviously it's... To some degree, it's going to have to be because it's, you know, from my perspective and it's an autobio. But yeah, I just want to always keep things fresh. And for me, the most important thing is I'm having fun with what I'm doing. And like I say, I'm a selfish artist in that way because I'm just like, I'm not like out to please an audience. Like I'm just like with It's Lonely, you know, like that book was made, I made that book for me. And I think it's wonderful. I think it's wonderful that people have connected with it. And it's really personally helped me feel not so alone, like hearing people's testimonies from reading it and stuff. But ultimately, like that book was just self-therapy that happened to be published just due to the circumstance. And I'm very grateful, but it was my book for me.
Do you think it should have stayed like in your drawer at your home?
I think my parents think that. I'm glad that it came out because I've had, I think there's been some occasions where I've had parents tell me that reading the book helped them understand their teenagers better, helped them understand their teenage kids, and helped open conversations that they wouldn't have been able to have before. And like I had somebody come up to my table in New York saying that he was having issues in his marriage because he struggles with depression. His wife just doesn't understand it because she's never gone through it. And he gave the book to her. And she kind of had this like eye-opening, oh, like this is what, you know, he said, like, this is how I feel. And it was just like those kind of very real things that, oh, a comic book has allowed people to have these conversations that they haven't had before. And for that, like, I just, you know, I'm so glad that I put it out, even though I do cringe with embarrassment sometimes.
I get that was also a point in the like self-therapy that you were doing with It's Lonely. Like you really wanted to address your depression, and I wanted to speak about Happy, the character, the personification of your depression. How did you design him or it?
So Happy came from a drawing that I did maybe 3 or 4 years ago at this point, where it was when I was doing a lot of drawing from life, and I was just drawing, you know, things in front of me because it was just how I kind of calm myself. It's just kind of like very calming to just draw, you know, what you see in front of you. And I wouldn't pencil, I'd just go straight in ink, just to start on one side of the page and just go to the other. And it's, you know, it comes out really wonky and strange, but it was just very, very calming. And I was drawing my kitchen, but as I got to one corner, I just started drawing this shape. And it was that was the first design of Happy, and it looks very similar to how he looks in It's Lonely, but it just kind of just came naturally. I just draw this little like demon creature kind of like peeking around the wall of my kitchen. He looks kind of creepy, but kind of goofy at the same time. Like maybe he's friendly, but like he's got these demon horns and he's got these really like bulgy, creepy eyes. And at that point, he didn't have the smile.
Because the smile that makes him really creepy.
That's what makes him creepy. And I think, when I figured that I wanted him to kind of be the representation of depression in It's Lonely, that's where the smile came from. And that was very inspired by Studio Ghibli designs. Because I wanted him to have that, because I think depression for me feels like that. It's like the first time you see Happy on the second page, it's kind of frightening. It's kind of, and it's this like scary image. Where I'm looking in the mirror and I'm holding a knife saying that, you know, I want to stab myself in the neck or whatever it is. And he's kind of peeking around the corner. I think it's just such a visceral image. The first time you see him, it's like, oh. But throughout the book, I think he becomes less and less scary. And there are points where he's just like, like just he's eating some fries, or he's just like, it becomes kind of more humanized. And I think that's how I felt with my depression when I started suffering with depression when I was around 14. And it was this scary thing that I couldn't understand. And I had no way to communicate it because, I was a child. But I think when you get older and you find ways to handle it, and you kind of, it becomes less scary. And it to me, it becomes this kind of, when I, get depression, I think this is this just silly kind of, it's scary, but it's also just kind of goofy and silly, and I think that's what like Happy was to me. Yeah.
And even though that you have a Happy for your mother also, or the mother. So I think that you wanted to have just one kind of personalization of the depression, because I assume you certainly know that depression can manifest in very, very different ways. But you decided to stick with a Happy also for your mom.
Yeah, I was thinking about that. I couldn't decide if I wanted to do a slightly different design for her or not. And I ended up keeping it the same because me and my mum have very similar depression. It runs in the family. It's genetic. It's just, our brains not working as they should. And it made sense to keep it the same. I was, if I had done, this is interesting you bring it up actually, because I want to do a follow-up to It's Lonely called It's Crowded at the Center of the Earth. Yeah. And my brother, my younger brother, who I love with all my heart, he's just such a wonderful person. He's 22 and he suffers from the same thing that me and mum do, but in a very different way. And he said, and I've told him that I wanted to talk about him and use him more as like the focal point for It's Crowded. And so it's more kind of me exploring depression through other people, and I would love to do kind of more of a series of interviews and kind of figure that into a comic somehow. I haven't figured out. We're very early days. This is just kind of initial thoughts, but if I was doing that with him, I would design his happy to look different, but and similar. It kind of like the vibe is similar, but have it visually be different. But for me and my mum, I think it just made sense because I think our depression is just very, very similar.
Mm. And that it really runs into the family, so it should have the same aspect. Yeah. But and I also wanted to know because there's a scene at the end of the book where Zoe speaks to Happy, like, and I'm just I just wanted to, if like you had I don't know how to say it in English, like, but it's really harsh to acknowledge that when you're in a depression, that you also might be comfortable in this depression. And maybe that's the hardest part of the book as far as I'm concerned. And I wanted to know if that was also hard, like to, I don't know if you had a revelation or if you knew that before drawing these pages.
I think that that idea did come to me while making the book. I think I realized that like you say, like it's comforting sometimes as a depressed person who's been depressed for a long time. It's, sitting in that void, you get like acclimatized to it, and you just get used to it. And like, what's the point of reaching outside of it? This is safe to me. This is safe. And I think that there's a point where I had to accept responsibility for my part in it. Like, I don't blame myself for being depressed, but at some point I have to say, like, enough is enough. I have to do my best. And even if my best doesn't look great, even if my best is just getting out of bed, that's I owe a responsibility to myself to try. And I think that's, and it is harsh. Like on the page, it's very harsh, but that's my, that's the harshest way that I could have put it. And I think it just needed to be like that for the me at the moment. Just needed to experience it in that way somehow.
There's also a scene which is really striking in the book. It's like the relatable scene when everyone goes to your table in the convention. They say that your work is relatable, and I think people were already saying that about Billy Scott, but now that It's Lonely has been published, I guess it's worse also, because even though you're speaking about yourself and your own history with depression, like so many people can just see themselves in your story or your feelings. How are you dealing with that?
Well, I think that scene got not misunderstood. I think that's maybe the wrong word, but I'm very aware that the book is relatable. I'm very aware it's very relatable. I just, like, at the time, I think I just felt, and I've always had kind of an issue since childhood. I've always had an issue kind of connecting with other people. I've always kind of felt this kind of disconnect. And so it's very strange when you feel like you're trapped in your own little world, and you're, maybe because, like, people don't tend to talk about things like depression, or they don't kind of, tend to open up about that stuff, and you feel so wrong and just so not, and then you put out stuff about it, and you're like, this is how weird and alien I am, and other people are telling you, oh no, I'm the same way. And it was just this really like kind of paradoxical thing to me at the time, where I just couldn't wrap my head around it. But I think now it's, it's kind of become a bit of a meme where, like, people come to my table and they just kind of say relatable, and that's it. And it's like, okay, very funny. That's like the 100th time I've heard that. Somebody at Thought Bubble made me a little badge that just says relatable in it. It's awesome. So no, I don't have any issue with it whatsoever. I think it was just at the time when I was just in a really deep depression, I just couldn't seem to have any kind of, human connection that I felt just, mattered or made sense to me. I just felt like, no, you don't understand this. And that was a very maybe egocentric way to view it, was that, nobody understands. And then I think the past few years, especially with reactions to the book and some just really beautiful, heartfelt emails I've got and stuff, I really think, no, like, people are like this. I've just been the person to, kind of put it out there.
So people
really expose myself with it.
People are writing to you about the book. You've been receiving messages about how maybe the book had an impact on their lives, or about something they couldn't figure out about themselves. So are you a therapist, Zoe?
No, I tend to not respond. I'm really bad at responding to any kind of emails. Like, I try and respond to work emails if I can, but any kind of direct message or kind of, emails about the book, just people trying to, say how they feel. I read them all. And it really makes me emotional, but I don't tend to respond, mainly because like you can have that kind of parasocial bond starting. And also I never know what to say. I really struggle with it. I think that it's like when people will come to my table and say, like, oh, I've been going through a lot and this book really helped and stuff. And I it's such a strange feeling, because I don't, you can't say, I don't want to say like, oh, I'm sorry, or, oh, well, glad it helped. I maybe you do. I'm not sure. It's just like such a weird, it's such a weird relationship to have with someone, because you don't, it's two strangers, but you have this shared experience, and there's just this kind of, there's an understanding, and I want to just be like, I understand, you know what I mean? But it's something that I find, and I'm not good at communicating. I always feel like I say things and they don't quite come out the way I intend them to. So it's just, it's difficult.
Yeah, and there's also something that is told in It's Lonely. Like, for example, when also you I'm always saying you, but it's your character. But when you are speaking with the waitress at the coffee, and I don't know if it's something for your generation, maybe, that the difficulty to connect with people otherwise than saying just like small talks or things like that. Is it's also something you wanted to address in this book?
And I think that's one of those, because I feel like I was always one of those people that was very much like, I hate small talk. Small talk is bad, and I'm bad at it. I think I kind of misunderstood small talk, because I think small talk is just so important for we live in a very isolated world, and it's strange because we're more interconnected than we've ever been, but we're just also isolated. And I think that small talk and just things like this, like, you get on the train and just somebody will say something, just pleasant and random to you. It doesn't really mean anything, doesn't really matter, but just that interaction alone, like, is charming and comforting. And I think that kind of because that scene was very much accurate. And I remember like, this woman who worked there, like, she was just obsessed with Christmas. I don't care about Christmas, but just like kind of engaging you with her interests and saying that I liked her stupid Christmas jumper, and her smiling about it. And I was like, oh, I've had an impact on somebody. And I didn't have to say, what I said didn't really matter. It didn't really mean anything. But this person has, got happiness from it. And I think it was just like such a, like, and I think that was very selfish of me to not kind of realize that earlier. But it's also just, I think people in my generation, people my age, are very, we're just very awkward. And I think because a lot of us grew up online. And so a lot of the kind of relations that people generations before built, that just kind of stopped happening. I think it's going to get worse and worse. Like, I think the generations below me, I think.
That we were thinking the same thing about you.
Yeah, but
your generation at the time.
Yeah, but I mean, I think that ended up being true. I think like a lot of like Gen Z struggle with them. But I mean, the world is getting more and more insane, and anxiety is just becoming just so much more common. And
but do you think that that the way that you grew up with internet, whether like I grew up with the internet was like born, and we ended up like discovering the internet, then the social networks and stuff like that. But when you were born and when you grew up, it was already there. And I wanted to know, do you think that maybe because you grew in a world when you were like allowed and you had the I'm losing my words. The habitude. No, I'm very sorry. When you're used to do something, the habits.
Habits, yeah.
Yeah. When you have the habits also to express about yourself or just online, maybe it's like it was easier for you to do a book about that subject.
Yeah, 100%. I think that my generation is the first really to be like, autobios have obviously been a thing forever, but I think that the rawness that people kind of express themselves online or, through art nowadays is just, because I think I grew up watching YouTube where people would like vlog their daily lives, and it was like you just got this insight into how everyone lived. So yeah, I'm sure that definitely played a part in it. I think also though with It's Lonely, I got to a point where I was just so depressed that I just didn't care what people knew about me. I just didn't care. I was like, I just, because I remember my parents saying that, and I remember some people in the comics industry as well warning me about it and saying, you sure you want people to know all this and worry about like, will people hire you and all this kind of stuff. And I thought, well, like I'm this, regardless of whether or not this book exists, I am this person, and if people are not going to like me or if people are not going to hire me based on these facts, I would rather kind of have this process of eliminating them early. Like with, if they don't like the book, they don't like me, we don't have to have that interaction, Because
you think that some people might have like stereotypes about depressed people and would say like, oh no, we can't hire Zoe because she's depressed. So maybe she's going to not stick to the deadlines or stuff like that.
I'm not sure if I believe that, but my mum definitely had issues with that and had issues, letting people know about her depression and kind of having issues with work and stuff because it's, it was so stigmatized, especially, back then. So I can understand where that worry came from because obviously she doesn't want me to experience the same things that she did. I think that the world is becoming a more understanding place. And I think that, if you can, I feel like I've definitely proved that I do the work and I'm kind of lucky in the way that when I'm depressed, it's like I want to work, like I want to put it somewhere. So sometimes I think that if I wasn't depressed, I maybe wouldn't have become an artist in the first place.
Well, you wouldn't be the first artist to have depression also. So it can also be used like maybe as a word of creative ideas or stuff like that. Because I noticed that like your cover, the original art was on sale a few days ago, and you said that like you drew it just after you were dumped, and like it was in the end maybe the best dumping you got.
Right.
I don't know.
Yeah, most productive breakdown I ever had.
You also drew like real people in this book, obviously because it's autobiographic, but you decided not to draw their faces. You went for animals, and I was discussing this with a friend just before. Was it influenced by BoJack Horseman or something like that? Or not?
So yeah, I love BoJack Horseman. I think maybe subconsciously I got the idea from that, but I was trying to figure out a way where I could. Well, there were several reasons. It was so much easier to draw the animal heads. They were very simple. They were very cartoon. Drawing people is difficult. Like drawing faces is difficult, and that's very time consuming. Whereas like the designs I ended up with for the animals were just so easy. I didn't have to pencil them half the time. They were just like very, very basic. There was that. There was the fact that I sometimes I'm not great with likenesses, and I also just didn't want to upset anybody if I drew them wrong. I also just like the idea of like, keeping people like vaguely anonymous, and there was like parts of the convention where people was like, was that character supposed to be me? And it's like, we'll never know. So yeah, and I just I wanted the book ultimately, although other people were featured, it was I didn't want to get into a situation where like anybody got upset with me over because I know that's happened before. I was on a panel with Noah Van Sciver, who apparently his dad tried to sue him after an autobio comic he put out, and so I'm like, yeah, I just want to avoid as much of that as possible. So yeah.
And your friend, your best friend, or your parents, they didn't have like issues about what you were telling about? Because I think there's if I remember, there's a scene where your best friend is like vomiting in the bathroom. Yeah, didn't she get mad at you for that?
I asked everybody who's featured in it. I got their permission first, and I told them exactly what it was going to be and what was going to be in it, what wasn't going to be in it, and so everybody was like very aware. It was and Izzy, my friend, I think she just loved it. She loved it. She's just a very honest person, and she knew that I was gonna tell the story how it happened, and that's just how things happen. She knew I was making a book, and it just became a joke with us, that like she was just giving me a storyline, and that's life. And I think that like there's always going to be conflict between and that was just such a obviously such a minor thing, but that's just what friendships and relationships are. Is there's always going to be ups and downs. In regards to my parents, I think it was a really complicated thing for them too. I know my dad is proud of what I've done with it, and my mum, I didn't think my mum would let me kind of tell her story in the book. I didn't think she was going to do that because she's very you're not supposed to talk about these kinds of things. And I think her opinions have shifted a lot recently in the past few years, maybe because of the book, maybe because my brother's suffering, and she's just kind of realizing that these kind of things need to be spoken about. But I know it's her own kind of trauma from the past, kind of being like I have to hide this part of myself. But I was proud of her for letting me kind of use her story in it. But I think she was uncomfortable, and I think she was definitely the one that was most like, "Oh, you sure you should do this?" And I, not quite.
But she wouldn't forbid you to.
No, and I don't think they would ever have, And I think that's partly also because they know that they couldn't stop me. I've always been kind of a problem child, and they're proud of me now because they know I've made somewhat of a success of things. But there were definitely times when I was a teenager where I was just so disobedient, and it's just really like they kind of know that as long as I'm safe and I'm as content as I can be, like they're happy with it, and I'm I'm an adult now, so.
You can do silly things.
I can do silly things, and they can be like, Zoe, but like, there's nothing they can do about it.
Speaking also just about the writing in the books, because you said before that you were not like plotting everything on paper, but still you break the fourth walls at so many points. You use so different techniques of writing. Like, is it like panels, or you are in a theater? You use post-its, or even texting yourself that you're playing. Like, and we are curious because we want to know how you are thinking about that. Is it really like from just your guts and you just had the ideas, or are you still a little bit thinking about it?
I think I do a lot of my writing when I'm walking. I live on a hill, and I have to walk like 4 miles to the supermarket and back. Like it's like a pretty long walk, and it's pretty strenuous. And I do a lot of my plotting there. But like how I write is more kind of the best way I can explain it is I like see things as an animation, and then when it goes wrong, or I go the wrong path, or I do the wrong thing, I just kind of rewind it in my head, and then I try something else. And like that's the best way I can explain it. And so I've always been thinking, like, I was always thinking about it, and I have this notes page on my phone from all these like crazy thoughts I was having. Like I think the one thing I remember where I was when I thought about restarting the book halfway through. I was just walking to the coffee shop, and I was just like, it was like near this bus stop, and it just randomly, just like the idea just like randomly came into my head. I don't know where it just happened. I thought, oh, that would be so cool. I think obviously I've been inspired by media that, fourth wall breaking media. Most recently, like I think a lot of the inspiration came from a video game called Doki Doki Literature Club.
I still haven't played. You mentioned it in the last podcast, and I downloaded it. I bought it, but I still haven't played it. I
talk about it to so many people because I just think it's brilliant, and I think that like a lot of the kind of fourth wall stuff came from that, because I was that's a game that it's just this meta fourth wall breaking story that uses the medium it's in. That story couldn't have been told as a comic, and like it's only couldn't be told as a video game, right? It's like so kind of that game made me kind of really think, okay, so what things are really comic specific that I could do with it? And yeah, like starting the book again in the middle. I mean, I guess you could you could maybe start a movie again in the middle, but like, a movie doesn't really have like a front cover as such when you're watching it. So it's like, that would be harder, right? But like for a comic, it's like, oh, it's perfect. It's a perfect. And you as the audience, are involved in turning that page. Like you're kind of involved in the process of restarting the book. And I just thought it was just, yeah. But I don't know. I don't know where exactly it came from. I think that's most of my ideas just seem to just come out of nowhere and yeah.
Because it's really like to have the cover, but not just the cover, you also have the credits, the colophon and stuff like that. So like you're really like as it was a whole new book, and I get that when you submitted the project to the editor of Image, Eric Stephenson, you didn't have anything to change. He was already like convinced that this would be the perfect project as it was.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they were so hands off with it, and I think it was like there was no editor attached. They fixed spelling mistakes because there were numerous spelling mistakes, but none of it was changed at all from how I intended it, how I submitted it. I was just, I think that they kind of knew that it was one of those things that had to just be my thing. And I think that that's one of the reasons why I didn't get an editor with it, because I thought that if somebody else, looked at, there are things that maybe, maybe they would, because it's not a very traditional comic book, and a lot of it just doesn't, it's, and I think a lot of editors maybe they have the ways that things should be. And I think that fitting that kind of book into the mold of like the things, how things usually are or how things should be just doesn't work. And luckily, like everybody at Image seemed to, kind of understand that and understand what I was doing with it, and just kind of was like, yep, this is Zoe being crazy. Let's just let it happen.
How did you manage the length of the story? It's 192 pages, or 96?
Yeah, 96.
Which is quite long.
Yeah, well, the book was, when I pitched it to Image, and they kind of was like, oh, we need, how many pages it's going to be. We need all this information. That was really early on. And I was like, oh God, I don't know. Because I haven't got a script. I haven't planned. I don't know where it's going. I have no idea.
There's no script for the book.
No.
It's okay.
There's no script whatsoever.
The script is your brain.
Yeah. There's like, I have a notebook of like scribbles, but they're just like stick men, and like it's just, it's to look at it like you can't tell. It's nonsense. I don't remember what I was saying.
About the length of
yeah.
Sorry.
So I wrote down on that form, I was like, yeah, it's going to be 100 pages. But as I was working on it, because there was no plot, there was no real page limit, I just kept going, and there's so many splash pages, and there's so many pages of just one little thing. But it's just like I love that. It's like the reason I love manga more than I love comics is because in manga.
What did you just say?
I know. I'm sorry. But it's format wise, just like,
it's all right.
Manga, just like, because you can have 5 pages where nothing really happens. It's not like nothing massively moves in the plot, but it's like just this like a wonderful character moment that if you take it out, the story's still the same. But just those 5 pages just kind of like are just such a wonderful experience. And I think with It's Lonely, I kind of got to, because there was no page limit, because I didn't know how many pages it was going to be, I could just, add whatever I wanted it could be, and it ended up being what it was. But yeah, it ended up being 100 more pages than anticipated.
Is it hard to do an ending to such a book?
Yeah, the ending was the one part that I did actually plan out. I don't remember when I kind of figured it out, but I have no idea when I figured that out. But once I kind of was starting to understand that, because I think the ending is very much, it kind of fits the story structure of like, oh, the hero and the villain have a standoff, but obviously there's no real hero or villain, but they have a standoff, and then there's a resolution with the past and whatever. Like there's, it kind of, it's very cheesy and traditional, but in a way that like I enjoy. I think Billy also had that kind of vibe of, it fit all the story beats that a story's supposed to have, but and it was it's really hard to explain. But yeah, that was the one part that I had planned out, because I knew that I needed to have some kind of clear not clear ending, because I know the ending isn't really
it's not
final.
really clear, no,
but I wanted to have some kind of like way of expressing, like, you know, there's a scene where I don't think people maybe understood because it wasn't very clear, but there's 2 pages towards the end that don't have any text on them, where it's after the photo page, the double page photo of me just kind of like looking at nothing in my apartment. And I change, like, the stripy t-shirt that I'm wearing throughout the whole book, I change it for this plain white t-shirt, and then I just go outside surrounded by people, and people don't have animal heads anymore. And it's just this kind of, like, it was supposed to be me kind of, you know, I'm not this main character, I'm not the stripy shirt person. And I got that idea because a lot of main characters in animation will wear stripes because they're eye-catching. And so it was like very much like, this is my main character t-shirt, and now I'm taking that off and putting on a plain one, and now, you know, I'm kind of, you know, I'm trying to enter the real world. Like, that was kind of the whole point of that. So yeah, and that's like, you know, that ending was definitely like thought about a lot more than the rest of the book.
and still you're concluding with a pigeon.
Yes, and
is it something that you wrote in this caption, or is it just like you trolling us?
So there was something written in there, and I couldn't figure out if I wanted to leave the panel as it was with the text, or I wanted to put this pigeon over it, because I really wanted that last panel to be like, dude, who cares? Who cares what I have to say? The book's over. Go home. Like, live your own life, you know, kind of. And that was that was kind of the thought process behind that. It wasn't like me trying to be like, you can't read the last thing. It was more just kind of like, you know, just like this animal just like got in the way. Okay, like, whatever, you know, like, maybe that's more important than, you know, what I was trying to say in that panel. Which, you know, sounds really pretentious now I'm talking about it, but that was the idea.
Could you tell us what was written?
It said thank you.
Okay. That's not pretentious at all.
I haven't told any. You're the first person who knows. Like, people are like, what does it say?
Yeah, so people should really listen to this podcast.
The secret law.
We are going to speak a little bit about more of your recent projects, but first, congratulations for your 5 nominations at the Eisner and also the Rustman Cumming Award. How did it feel to have such a high number of nominations with only 2 books published? Yeah,
it felt kind of stupid, honestly. I remember just feeling like that.
Well, three with Rain also, because it also had nominations.
I mean, I was obviously like very grateful and very like, you know, I was really taken aback by it. But I remember after the announcement came out, and I was just sat on my kitchen floor, like in silence in the dark for a few hours, because I was just like, this is too much. This is like, I feel like my imposter syndrome was like really, really having a wild one with it. Yeah, and it was cool. And I'm really glad, like, I'm strangely glad that I didn't walk away with any Eisners, because I just wanted to be like, thank you. My God, if I just like, I'm too new to this. And I feel like I don't know what I'm doing. And I enjoy that at this point. I don't, you know, I just want to be like someone who's like figuring out comics. And at some point, maybe I'll make something that, you know, people could be like, wow, okay, that's a good piece of work. Like, that's a fantastic comic. And I hope that I do get to that point at some point. But
so you're not like putting pressure on yourself, because, you know, I think It's Lonely had such a great recognition from the whole industry, but also the readers. And so you're not putting your pressure on yourself, like, can I best it? Can it be?
I think I've decided that It's Lonely is always going to be its own thing. And I, you know, I guess I can't really use the words like, oh, I'm going to make a better comic, because I don't think that's possible. I don't think you can compare, like, you know, apples and oranges, right? It's like, you can't, you know, I think anything I make now, it's going to be different. And, you know, some people will like, you know, it's like some people are like, most people who read my work will say that they prefer It's Lonely to Billy. They'll say Billy, you know, It's Lonely is better. It's Lonely is a way better book. And I would agree. Just technically it's just better. But there are some people who are like, yeah, I liked It's Lonely, but Billy Scott is, you know, way better to me. And I think that's just how it's going to be, is it's just going to be kind of, you know, people having their own kind of favorite. And I'm not trying to better anything I've done in the past. I just want to make what I want to make, what speaks to me at the time, and just have fun ultimately, because else what's the point? And
since you have also experimented the different ways of working, like as being a sole writer and drawer on your projects, but also drawing to another one's script. And I remember also you told me that it was more difficult for you to connect with the characters or the stories if it wasn't your script. So are you? Do you intend on just working by yourself for your next project?
Yeah, Yeah, I find working by myself a lot more fulfilling. I find doing the because writing and drawing, like making a comic, being a cartoonist, it's one combined thing. Like the writing and art are not separate things to me. It's all one thing. And I think taking them apart, either doing just writing or just drawing, it doesn't feel complete to me. And I just feel this disconnect. I mean, I can see myself in future working with writers again. I mean, I had fun doing Rain. I thought it was fun. I had a good time with it, and it was a good team, and it just ran very smoothly, and it was great. But yeah, there's definitely like, but it is easier. It's easier. Like I feel like writing and drawing a book from scratch is like the stress. If I'm just drawing, if somebody else is in control of writing it, and I just have to draw it, it's like challenging in other ways, but it's it's less stressful. But maybe in the future I'll work with writers again. But just for now, I just think I just have so many ideas that I want to, exercise. So
I guess many publishers contacted you to do some work. So you have like the pleasure of being in charge of choosing your own projects. How do you do that? Because I think you did like also a short story for Harley Quinn for DC Comics. So
yeah.
So you still wanted to do a little bit of a superhero.
Yeah, and that one in particular was fun because they were really like, just do whatever you want, And I found recently that working for like licensed stuff, like I'm writing Life is Strange right now, the comics, and I love Life is Strange. I've been obsessed with that franchise since it came out. Came out when I was around 15, and I just fell in love with it instantly. But working with characters that have past, and they have things, the future projects, and they have all these like they're owned by all these different companies and like so many people involved. It's really difficult, and like the just creative, like you can just get so just devastated. Like I had to rewrite the pitch three times, not because like they've said this is great, but we can't do it because XYZ, all these reasons that I couldn't have ever known. And so yeah, I would like the Harley Quinn thing that I did. It was so much fun because it was really just like, there are no rules, go wild with it. Because there are definitely there are projects that Marvel and DC have approached me with that sound really fascinating, but then you get into it a little bit and you're like, oh, I can't do what I want to do. And I as a creator, as an artist, that's like, it's just like, it's like, no, please, I need full freedom. So yeah.
Which brings me to Hack and Slash, Back to School, because it's not your creation. It was created by Tim Seeley quite a few years ago. So is it also like a challenge or hard to take to have your own take on someone else's characters?
With that, no. And that's another reason why I took it, was because Tim just let me do whatever I wanted. He hasn't.
So, but did you go to Tim or Tim?
No, Tim came. Well, it was the story is very. From my perspective, Tim came to me about it. But I think there was like some other talks about somebody had told him that I might be interested in it, and though it became this. Anyway, well, Tim. The first I'd heard of it is Tim messaged me being like, "Hey, heard you might be interested in doing this. Do you want to do this?" And I was like, sure, why not? But he really just left me alone with it, and it was because it's also a prequel, so it's like I don't have to worry about continuity or anything. Because I like Hack Slash. I've read like a lot. I haven't read all of them. There is a lot. It started 20 years ago at this point. So yeah, it was just very, very free and very much do what you want, make it you. And I think I really have, and Tim seems really happy with it, which is great.
It really seems like when reading it, it really seems like you have a ton of fun, because we can see like you're still mixing the way of writing, because you're changing, even going through a video game in the second issue, and even like you've said that you're a fan of video games, and maybe Hack and Slash was also a way to literally express it, because we have, even with Vous, which is from Lollipop Chainsaw, and we are in a video game in second issue, so it was just a way also to express your love for this other medium.
Yeah, I think that like with Hack Slash, I knew I was going to have this freedom that I maybe wouldn't even feel on my own projects, if that makes sense, because it's just such a fun world where anything goes. And I don't think any of my projects, I think my projects that I want to do are a lot more grounded than that. And so to have this place that was really just this playground where like, you can just go wild, and you can do all these like crazy, pervy, gory things that you maybe couldn't do it. Like I wouldn't maybe put in my own stories, just because it just doesn't fit the tone. yeah, it was fun for those reasons, because there was just this insane amount of freedom to explore. And yeah, with issue 2 with the video game stuff, I was just like, I just want to make up stories relevant to my interests, because obviously it's so much easier, and it's fun, and I enjoy it as a creator, you know.
And do you know how to make a comic book funny? Because you're really like in some kind of absurd humor, especially the scene with the flowers, with Frog Boy and the flowers. Like, I don't like, you know, it just doesn't make any sense, but it still does, and that's why it's so funny. But I don't know if like you're thinking also about it.
Yeah, I mean, I love comedy. I love writing. You know, trying to be witty with my work. I think it's just kind of it's something that's important to me. I would never, for example, be able to write Batman, for example, just because it's just so like, it's pretty humorless. He's a humorless guy.
Well, you could do a funny Batman.
Funny Batman. Hey, DC, can I do a funny Batman?
But speaking about, you know, the editorial stuff and telling you stuff that you can't do, I think DC would be they would do like they would tell you you can't make a Batman funny, you know. He's always brooding, he lost his parents. Zoe.
Yeah, but I'm sorry, Batman fans, but no, I mean, there's a place for those stories, and I love them. I love humor, and I love having, you know, like, it's just important to me. It's like, why It's Lonely, I think that there's a lot of humor throughout it. Like there's a lot of people who regard It's Lonely as a dark comedy, and I love that. I think that's wonderful. I think like it does have that, you know, kind of Fleabag vibe to it, for sure. BoJack Horseman as well. Just and that's just something that's important to me. It's like, I think a lot of depressed people just really like just humor, and I enjoy, you know, making people laugh and making myself laugh. You know, if I'm writing during something and I can like make myself chuckle, I'm like, yeah, that's staying in the book.
Are you a fan of horror in general? I think I know the answer, but I wanted more specifically what were your influences? Because we in the hack and slash also, you can do like slashers and monsters, and then you can do everything. So what are your main references?
I love horror games. I think horror games are my favorite type of media on the planet. You know, I enjoy horror movies, but I'm not like really there with it. But like horror games, I think partly because I think I maybe spoke about this in the last interview, but I grew up watching my dad play video games, and and he would play a lot of games, like maybe not.
You mentioned Bioshock.
Yeah, that was one of the first ones, and I know some people don't regard that as a horror game, but when you're like 7 years old,
it's quite frightening. Even when I played it, I was like 16 or 18, and I was frightened by the overture.
Yeah. It's the atmosphere in that game is terrifying, but I think that's kind of what started my love for it, and I got into kind of maybe more like indie horror games, and I just find it's like indie horror games that are made by like, you know, one person or a small group of people, and it's just such a personal experience, because I think a lot of people use horror as a way to express, you know, inner demons, or express things that, you know, they're scared about, but give it a scary monster as a stand-in, right? And I just find them just so personal, and I enjoy, you know, like I love creature designs and things, and so yeah, it just fits.
And is it hard to design creature, or to go into gore or body horror, because you put that also a lot? And even in the short story you did for Creepshow, like there's a lot of body horror. So is it hard? Because you said that drawing faces was difficult. So if you're just chopping bodies,
I mean, I find it. I think it's pretty easy because. But well, the way I draw it, at least, because I think the way I draw like body horror, or like, you know, somebody's arm getting cut off, it's just like so inaccurate. I think probably like I don't, you know, I'm not searching at references of like decapitated child or whatever. So it just like it's just
you will get the police if you do that, right?
Like sometimes they're my references. I'm like innocently searching something for a reference, and I'm like, oh, this looks so weird. But yeah, I think, you know, body horror and creatures usually are fairly easy, because I think it's just about taking things from nature, taking natural things, and just twisting them. Sometimes it's challenging, especially if you want like a creature to have a specific vibe, and you have a very clear vibe in your head, but you draw it and it's just like it's not giving the vibe that you want it to. Like I've had that issue a lot of times. But I think I have like a pretty large reference library in my head now from just so many, you know, things like Fallout, like the creature designs of the Fallout games, terrifying, like centaurs, like they're all like mutated humans and stuff. And And I love that. And that's, been in my mind for, nearly 20 years at this point. So.
Okay. And I've got one last question. I think that everyone is thinking about it. Where is I Might Be Evil?
It's happening. It has a publisher, like there's a contract signed and stuff, but I'm not sure it's going to be my next project even. I think I Might Be Evil is something that I fear I have set my expectations for it too high, and I want it to be I'm like, oh, I want to make it, but am I good enough yet? I want it to be this beautiful creation and fully black and white, very manga inspired, very much like a love letter to manga and video games is what I want it to be, and just it will happen. Just maybe not in the next year or so.
I can wait for that. I'm not putting any pressure on you.
Thank you.
Well, it was such a pleasure to chat with you, Zoe, and I hope that maybe a Hack and Slash will be published in France, so we can have a new conversation mainly focused on about horror and sexy girls. Thank you.
Sign me up.
Thank you so much for being here. And we are concluding this, and I'm just switching back to French. Bye, Zoe.
Bye.
On espère donc que ce podcast vous a plu. Si c'est le cas, n'oubliez pas de le faire savoir, hurler dans la rue que First Print c'est cool, mais sinon partagez simplement l'émission sur les réseaux sociaux. Et vous pouvez également nous soutenir si Tipeee, si le cœur vous en dit. En tout cas, je vous dis à bientôt pour la prochaine émission. Salut.